Hello class, it's Mario Robledo. Don't know what happened with the earlier recording. There was an issue with YouTube and the length of the video. So anyways, today I'm going to be talking about the book. The book I'm going to be reviewing is Rise of the Warrior Cop by Bradley Balco. This book in particular is a very interesting read. It focused on the phenomenon of paramilitarism in the United States and the militarization of America's police forces. And the main theme of this book that Balco introduces is how America needs to start focusing or start paying attention to at least this rise of the militarization of police. One of the key themes that Balco introduces at the beginning of his book is the fact of the rise of SWAT raids in the United States. SWAT teams are being used on a daily basis here in the United States, and SWAT raids are happening more and more frequently throughout the days. From the early 1960s to present day, there's been a huge increase in the amount of SWAT raids that happen in the United States. So this is one of the points that Balco brings up in the book. Not just the fact that there are so many SWAT raids happening at an alarming rate, but the way that they're being carried out. He gives an example in his book how these SWAT raids are not just conducted in a certain way. They're most of the time they're conducted very violently. He gives an example, the Columbia Police Department SWAT raid, where a SWAT team broke into a home and tackled the guy down and shot killed one of his dogs, and there were stray bullets going around. So basically, the whole SWAT raid was carried out not in the correct fashion, which led to a huge uproar and so forth. But he wrote that story in Rise of the Warrior Cop to demonstrate the fact that these SWAT raids are in fact very violent. And not only that, he does back up his point that of course we need SWAT teams. Why? Because when criminals don't want to adhere to the law, and when there's certain emergencies where there's a hostage situation, there's violent fugitives on the run, there's a bank robbery or so forth, where there's something violent, or the policeman's life can be in danger. Of course, that's where SWAT teams come into play to head on these types of crimes where violence needs violence, right? But Balco emphasizes that a lot of these SWAT raids are happening at alarming rates, and we know that there's not. I mean, there is violent crime in the U.S., but not as much of an alarming rate as there is SWAT raids. So he's saying that these SWAT raids are being used for non-consensual acts, criminal acts. These are non-consensual, non-violent criminal acts, and these SWAT teams are basically introducing violence into a non-violent situation. And that's one of the dangers that Balco says that the police are doing wrong, is basically using these SWAT raids, introducing violence to non-violent situations, which leads the public to believe, or leads the public to think, oh, okay, violence is the answer, when in fact the police are meant to protect and to serve and to preserve life, and not introduce violence. Of course, violence is one of their tools they need to control crime and so forth, or solve situations such as those emergency situations. But in this case, Balco is saying that these SWAT raids are in fact introducing just more violence, or just basically uh, feeding to the problem. Another thing that Balco emphasizes in his Rise of the Warrior Cop is that these SWAT teams, they didn't just come out of thin air. They were funded. They were funded from the Nixon administration to the creation of the Drug Enforcement Administration, the Department of Homeland Security, the terroristic attacks of 9/11. Basically, they led the government to launch the war on drugs, the war on terror, and give funds and grants and monies to these domestic police forces, which then were able to obtain military-grade weaponry, tactical training from the Army. The Pentagon, I know he spoke about, gave military surplus weaponry to these domestic police forces. And basically this led to them having these, like, as it shows in the book, you see they're all geared up and so forth. There's no tanks or 50 caliber weapons, but he speaks in his book how these domestic police forces were able to obtain this type of weaponry. What for, obviously, right? They're not in Afghanistan, they're not in Iraq, they're in the United States. So it's one of the things that Balco brings up in his book is that these police forces are being armed like they're ready for battle, and battle against what, their own citizens. So obviously he wants to make a point in his book with that, and he says how the the weaponry and all that is coming from the government and is being funded through them because of this war on drugs, this war on terror. So it gives the police a little bit more leeway to use these type of weapons and tactics and all that. Of course, they have really nice, shiny, cool-looking things. Who doesn't want to use them, right? So these police forces are obviously are placed pressure by the government to use them. You know, whether it's to take down more drug criminals. Solve more issues in money laundering or so forth. So they use these tactics and these SWAT teams basically to produce results and to please the government. One of the things that Balco does also speak about in Rise of the Warrior Cop is how, or one of the solutions rather, relating to policing and police in the U.S. is that police should gear more towards community policing, which means going out in the community, seeing what the community needs, serving them, getting to know the community better, becoming one with the community, communicating with the community, versus entering people's homes, storming violently, and so forth, right? And I actually have one quote from Rise of the Warrior Cop. It's on page 334 near the conclusion. And it actually speaks about how I said earlier about the SWAT raids being on these non-consensual violent acts. And it says, police today are armed, dressed, trained, and conditioned like soldiers. So they have this soldier-like mentality. They are given greater protections from civil and criminal liability than normal citizens. They are permitted to violently break into homes, often at night, to enforce laws against non-violent, consensual acts. And even then, often on rather flimsy evidence of wrongdoing. So basically, the cops are doing whatever it takes to produce these results for the government, to use their weaponry, to introduce violence where there is no violence. That's what that quote there said in page 334 of Rise of the Warrior Cop. But like I said before, Balco was introducing this ideal that the police should be more of serving the community versus going to war with the community, you know, because if the cops become more of he speaks of them being more reactionary policing, reactive policing, basically only getting out of their squad cars when there's a problem, when there's an issue or something negative happens, that's when the police react. Then of course the community is going to see them in a negative view because they're only going to see them when these negative things are happening, when these SWAT raids are happening, when, you know, versus if the police are serving the public in community policing and they're becoming one and they become part of the community. If the police need to suit up, you know, for a SWAT raid or something like that, the community is going to view them in a more positive view because they're going to see them as part of the community. Oh, they're going to protect us. You know, the reason that they're suited up, they're going to go and get the bad guy. You know, just as in a perfect example of this was the Boston Marathon bombing, when they were trying to get the suspect. I know that there was a huge demonstration of tanks and, well, not tanks, but military-style vehicles, and all the cops were like geared up to the T with their AR-15s and everything. But the public had no problem with that because they knew that the police was there to protect them and they were there to apprehend the suspect, you know. So it's kind of the same thing. If the police are there, if they gear themselves more to serve the community and be part of the community, when they gear up and when they're out there doing these SWAT raids and all that, the community's going to see it more in a positive view because in fact they are serving the community. You know, they have this more communication and connection with the community, which is very important when it comes to police work. And that's one thing that Balco emphasizes in Rise of the Warrior Cop. So I guess that can be one of the positive things in his book. Another thing that Balco does speak about in Rise of the Warrior Cop was the fact, sorry, I lost my train of thought. It's the fact, and I think I have it here. Give me 1 second. Okay, so Balco explains that throughout history of the United States, The police have begun to shift towards paramilitarism. From the beginnings of the federal government army being called upon to solve domestic issues, to the formation of the first SWAT team, it's clear that the book emphasizes that the police have formed a military and adopted this military-style administrative structure. Yeah, the police force originally was created to serve the public, like I said, but over time, with the war on drugs, with the era of 9/11, Department of Homeland Security and all that giving these grants, the policing in the United States have begun to suit themselves, with the latest weaponry, with the latest military-style training. The use of violence seems to be a norm, in the United States, versus them serving the public. Like I said before, the norm has shifted to using violence, to solve issues, which Balco says is a great danger. And he says, you're gonna have good cops and you're gonna have bad cops. And he says the problem is that if you keep producing these bad cops, you need to take a look at the policies and the procedures in the United States, in the departments, of why are these departments continuing to hire these bad cops? You know what I mean? And that's one of the key things that you really need to look at, is the policy and the procedures. And to conclude this book review, there's an interesting quote that I found on page 336. And it says, "Systems governed by bad policies and motivated by incentives will produce bad outcomes. Today, laws, policies, and procedures select for personalities attracted to aggressive, antagonistic policing, isolate police from the communities they serve, and condition police officers to see the people they serve, the people with whom they interact every day, as the enemy. We shouldn't then be surprised when cops then begin to see a world divided between cops and their families and everybody else." So it says, this quote says, "Today, laws, policies, and procedures select for personalities attracted to aggressive, antagonistic policing." So again, Balco emphasizes that the only way the solution to the problem, or one of the solutions to the problem, is to change that warrior mindset that these cops are given out when they start in the academy or when they're hired. Just as I believe it was in the Rise of the Warrior Cop that they show a recruitment video, to one audience, which shows like SWAT teams going in, raiding people's houses, tackling people down, and so forth, using violence. And then you show another recruitment video, and the recruitment video shows the police serving the community, the police dealing with the people one-on-one, more of like a counseling and social service type of video. Well, you're gonna recruit two different types of people, right? You're gonna see the people who saw the aggressive and violent video. There's gonna be one basically a group of people, and the other group of people are going to be the ones that saw the social service, community-based recruitment video, right? Well, the problem is that most of these recruiters are showing these type of violent videos, and of course, when you have these policies and procedures which recruit these bad cops or these aggressive type of policing, then of course you're going to produce individuals who are there for the violence, who are there for the aggressive type of policing, and therefore it leads to a lot of these problems. So Balco says one of the things in Rise of the Warrior Cop is that we need to take a look at these policies and procedures and incentives that are for these individuals, and why they're producing these bad cops and so forth. So that's one of the changes that needs to be made here in the U.S. And again, the fact that we need to really increase community policing and change this mindset of the cops going to war with their own citizens and so forth, and gearing up as if they're ready for war, ready for battle against their citizens. They need to be reminded that they're here to serve the public. They're here to serve each other. You know what I mean? They're here to serve their community. They're not here to have this war on drugs or this war on terror. Yes, it's important to get the drugs off the streets and to make sure our country is safe. But at the same time, they need to be reminded that they are here to, above all, to serve the community and to place their lives first, and the lives of the citizens before their lives. And so a lot of the times they adopt this type of soldier type of mentality, and they forget that they are a police force and they are meant to serve and protect. So these are just some of the themes that are brought up in Rise of the Warrior Cop. So by looking at the policies and procedures, there can be a really big change Balco says in changing the way of recruiting good and bad cops and so forth. So, like I said, I apologize. This was my second recording. The other recording deleted. Don't know what happened on YouTube, but like I said, thank you, Dr. Mackin, for a wonderful semester. I really did learn a lot of new concepts, a lot of new themes in policing, since I myself work with the Sheriff's Department and through the Department of Homeland Security. It's really interesting to see a different point of view, especially when reading Rise of the Warrior Cop really stuck out to me because I have a lot of close friends who are in the SWAT team here in Webb County, and I never really saw the whole violent, non-consensual, introducing violence into a non-consensual violent crime and so forth. It was kind of eye-opening, and also the fact that these grants and so forth are giving the power and giving the funds to the domestic police forces. It's just different. I never really thought of it in the way Balco did, but I guess when he speaks of it in that way, it makes sense. But like I said, thank you again, Dr. Mackin, and I really hope you enjoyed the book review, and I hope to have future courses with you in the future. Thank you again.